This is the story of a time long ago, when the lands between were ravaged by the demigods. Only one tarnished dared to challenge their power. He possessed a strength that the world has never seen, a strength surpassed only by the power of his heart. He journeyed the world battling the offspring of Queen Marika, dodging 1,000 blades on the way to become the Elden Lord.
Let's talk about it! Hi, I'm Andy, welcome to Screenfire. As you can see, we are not in our usual setting. That's because we are reconstructing our studio, so it may take a few weeks, but just stay tuned. A lot of hype has surrounded the initial announcement of Elden Ring in 2019. An open world title from the developers of Dark Souls? And George R. R. Martin is writing the lore and story for the game? How could you not be hyped for this? 3 years have been passed since then, and the hype only increased as gamers waited patiently. To say that Elden Ring has to fulfill high expectations would be an understatement. So, was it worth the wait? Absolutely. It has been years since I've been left in awe by a video game. There is so much to talk about this game. Oh, and before I delve into what makes Elden Ring a masterpiece, I want to assure you there won't be any spoilers for the story or the later stages of the game. Trust me, you want to experience this world without any prior knowledge. Of course, everything I say is just my personal opinion. So if you feel differently or you agree, let me know in the comments. And if you like our videos, as always, we would be happy if you give us a like and hit the bell. If you have seen my videos on Horizon Forbidden West and Dying Light 2, then you've probably noticed that I'm feeling a bit tired about open world games. Of course, I still can enjoy them, and Horizon as well as Dying Light 2 were amazing games on their own right. But I can't help the feeling of staleness I've been experiencing with the open world genre as a whole. Many open world games follow a very similar formula. You're thrown into a massive map full of markers, collectibles and side quests that you check off like a grocery list. The drive to explore usually dies down after a few hours. So, to be honest, I wasn't very keen on playing another open world title right after finishing 2 massive games within a few weeks. But you know what? This game offers one of the most unique and enjoyable open world I've ever had the pleasure to experience. When I started my playthrough, I only planned to play for a short while since it was already late in the evening. Hey, just a small peek into it, maybe get to know the controls, and tomorrow I'll play the whole day. However, when I made the first step into the lands between, that's how the realm where the story takes place is called, I basically ruined my sleeping routine. I played until 4 AM in the morning. I was so tired the next day, but I, of course, don't regret it at all. Yes, that's how much fun exploring the open world of Elden Ring is. In fact, I didn't progress the main story at all that night. Yet, I've experienced moments that other games usually reserve for the main quest. I've explored a dungeon full of nasty goblins and fire traps. I've killed a werewolf with a giant sword. I plundered a camp full of hostile knights, and I fought a giant dragon. I know, this all could feel very generic, but it didn't. And this was just in the opening area you get access to after finishing the tutorial section, all reachable within 3 minutes of walking. None of that was part of the main story quest. There is so much to explore in the lands between. As you can see, I'm very enthusiastic about this game. But Let's get to the gist of it. Why exactly is the open world design of Elden Ring so fucking good? After all, these events I've just told you about could have also happened in Skyrim or maybe in Dragon Age. Why is Elden Ring different? Elden Ring succeeds in creating a true sense of exploration. What do I mean by that? Well, first of all, Elden Ring doesn't really point you towards any goal. Yes, there is an overarching main quest, and yes, you do get hints where you have to go to progress the main story, but the game doesn't exactly dictate how you get there. There is no open distinction between main quest and side content. The game doesn't mark the next main quest boss fight on your map. In fact, nothing on the map is marked, except for the so-called Sites of Grace, which are sites of rest where you can upgrade your stats and replenish your flasks. There are no towers to climb on, there are no markers for NPCs, side quests or enemy camps. These things all of course exist in the game, but there is nothing that points you towards them. You just have to find them yourself. Your only hints for the main quest are light beams that the Sites of Grace emit. They just point you towards the general direction of the next main quest, though they do not show you the exact location you have to get to. As for other content in the open world, you'll have to rely on hints scattered throughout the world. For example, you will meet NPCs that tell you where you can find something. Yeah, oftentimes they speak in a very cryptic manner and don't really reveal what exactly you will find there. It could be a very useful item, it could be also a trap. Sometimes they mark a location on your map, but only after you talk to them more than once. Other times they won't mark anything on your map and you will just have to make sense of it yourself. If a character says something like, "The Cave of Despair hides secrets few dare to unveil," you'll have to guess yourself where this cave could be. Is there a mountain nearby? If yes, then it makes sense to check this area out. Perhaps you find a cave entrance. The game doesn't hold your hand at all. This may seem very uncomfortable at first, but it truly helps to create this strong sense of exploration. You can really feel it was a core design principle. It was built around exploration as a gameplay element and not to keep players busy with lame filler content. You will constantly find new locations, you will meet strong monsters the game doesn't tell you about, we are marking the location beforehand. Oh, and speaking of monsters, the enemy design and variety in this game is nothing short of insane. I think Elden Ring offers one of the most varied roster of enemies I've seen in a game for a long time. Even the most generic enemies like skeletons and dragons can come with a twist you may not have expected. But it wouldn't be a true From Software title if there were no crazy enemy designs. Some of the creature designs even venture into Lovecraftian territory. Other designs are really strange when you see them first, yet all of it feels like it belongs perfectly into this dark fantasy world. Even some of the crazy designs such as giant lobsters, yes, you heard right, fucking giant lobsters are in the game. They don't feel out of place, by the way. They've made me almost crap my pants, and more than once. But the enemies don't just look intimidating. All of them have a certain set of combat behavior that you will have to learn if you want to fight them successfully. Which brings us to the probably most controversial aspect of any From Software title. Yes, the difficulty, of course. From Software games such as Dark Souls, Bloodborne and Sekiro are famous for their high difficulty. In fact, it's ingrained into the very gameplay philosophy of those titles. By now, Souls-like games, that's how the subgenre spawned by the success of Dark Souls is called, are nothing new. I've had my fair share of experience with the genre and Demon's Souls is one of my favorite PlayStation titles. Elden Ring is obviously a Souls-like. This means it's a very unforgiving game. Also, the difficulty level of Elden Ring is much more variable than in Bloodborne. This has to do with the new open world approach and the boss battles. However, you can choose to do the bosses whenever you want, for the most part at least. Unlike in the more linear previous From Software games, you have now the option to skip a lot of encounters and to save them up for later. This has some pros and cons. You get access to a horse rather early in the game, which makes traveling really simple. You can call your horse all the time and use it to flee from enemies. Most of them don't chase you for longer than maybe a few meters. In addition to this, there's also a stealth mechanic which is clearly borrowed from Sekiro. You certainly have more options to tackle combat encounters in the open world than you do for the most part in previous titles. Now the problem is that there are so-called legacy dungeons where you are put into a confined area, for example into a castle, and this is pretty much closer to classic Souls-like games. The problem with this is that you experience a very steep spike in difficulty once you enter those dungeons, which you need to do since this is where the main story progresses. Personally, I feel like these difficulty spikes were a bit too extreme. But hey, I wouldn't call myself a Souls-like expert. I've played and enjoyed some of them, but I'm nowhere as good as many other gamers out there. You can counter these difficulty spikes by going back into the open world and looking for new loot, or by gathering runes to upgrade your stats. But it's still, nonetheless, very frustrating to get your ass handed by the same boss 30 times in a row, especially when you've beaten a dragon in the open world without much effort before. An aspect we haven't talked about yet are the RPG elements. Elden Ring is still a roleplay game after all. This means you'll spend a lot of time collecting experience points, which are called runes in the game, and searching the world for new loot. Unlike in more run-of-the-mill RPGs, you're not exactly flooded with loot. Actually, it takes a lot of luck and patience to find new equipment for your character. It took me almost 6 hours until I found new weapons, and one of them was way weaker than my starting weapon, while the other one was just not usable for me yet since my level was too low. This again has upsides and downsides. For one, you do have to learn how to fight with the weapons you have. You can't just walk around and hope to find the ultimate weapon to own them all every 20 meters. Sometimes you will enter a village full of monsters and wizards, destroy them all and kill their main leader, and only to be rewarded with a shield that your character can't even use. The downside is that sometimes it feels very unrewarding. Whether you like this approach or not is really up to what kind of player you are. Personally, I suggest killing enemies for runes and trying to focus on making your equipment better. There are smiths in the world as well as in the hub area where you can increase the strength of your equipment. Of course, there's also a class system in Elden Ring. When you start a new game, you get to choose from various classes for your character. There are combat-based classes such as the Samurai, which is the class I choose by the way, and classes which are geared towards magical combat such as the Prophet. There's even a caveman class called Wretch, which makes you start with incredibly low stats, no armor outside of your trousers and a club. So if you're into masochism, this is the class for you. Your choice does have influence on whether you play in a more defensive manner or if you prefer an offensive style of combat. But in the end, the choice of class only affects your starting stats and your equipment in the first 20 to 25 hours. There are no class-based ultimate abilities or anything like that. You can start out as Wretch with no armor, but end up as a knight with a magic wand that wrecks every enemy with blue magic balls of death. Personally, I really like this approach because it does allow me to change my playstyle later on, should I for whatever reason become very unhappy with my badass samurai warrior. We've talked quite a bit about the open world and the gameplay of Elden Ring, but what about the story? Well, there is a main premise, the rest is really cryptic. The main goal is clear from the beginning. You want to get the Elden Ring. Why do you want it? What does it do? Who are the lords that hide the keys to the ring? No idea. The game really doesn't want to tell you what the hell is going on. And okay, this sounds very negative, but that's not how I mean it. I think it actually enhances the experience. The story is not really told through traditional means such as the use of cutscenes or files. Yes, items have some descriptions that you can check out in the inventory. They do contain lore, but as mentioned before, it's all very cryptic. You really have to dig into it and connect a lot of dots to get a better understanding. Elden Ring is also a really scary game. It's not a horror game, of course, but what it definitely shares with the survival horror genre is this constant feeling of danger. You will never feel safe, and you shouldn't. Almost everything wants to kill you. Let your guard down for one moment and I guarantee you some unholy abomination will emerge straight out of hell to punish you for your carelessness. Any ride through the world can turn into a nightmare trip. There are monsters everywhere, and the further you travel into the northern parts of the map, the more pissed off and bigger they become. Now, I probably make it sound like Elden Ring is almost perfect, and the game gets as close to being perfect as an open world RPG can get. But there are some very annoying technical problems that do drag the experience down. I played on a PlayStation 5, a very capable piece of hardware you would say, yet I've had to deal with constant frame rate drops. It never actually felt like the game ran smoothly for longer than a few minutes. Most of the time it felt like 40 to 50 FPS instead of the promised 60. In some cases, like when something explodes, the frame rate goes down to 25 to 30 FPS. It doesn't really ruin the game, but it is very noticeable. And honestly, in my opinion, it's disappointing. The graphics do look a bit outdated and last gen, but then again, Elden Ring makes more than up for that with its unique gothic art design and the atmospheric world. Still, this is not the first From Software game that has these problems. It's really time that the studio learns to avoid releasing games with technical issues. There are also reports about some very big problems with the PC version. Sure, none of this drags down the gameplay itself, but it does affect the experience enough for me to lower the score a bit. Nonetheless, Elden Ring offers one of the most thrilling and fresh experiences we've seen in recent years. It's truly a masterpiece through and through. I could talk all day about it, but my wife wants me to finish.
Hurry up!
Okay. From Software can be very proud of themselves. They created a modern classic and the first potential candidate for Game of the Year 2022. I give Elden Ring a 9 out of 10. And I'm willing to amp it up to a 9.5 out of 10 if From Software managed to fix the technical issues. If you like Souls-like games or want to play an open world RPG that rivals games such as Skyrim and the difficulty doesn't bother you, then this is your game.
The Elden Ring. Oh, Elden Ring. Shattered.
I really hope you enjoyed our Elden Ring review. It's freezing out here, so if you want to support us, please don't forget to subscribe, leave a like, and tell us in the comments what was your favorite or your first Souls game. See you in the next video.